All right, so tonight we're going to talk all about performance nutrition, or the strategic usage of pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition and hydration to strategically level up your gymnast performance and focus. And for those of you who are on here live, I put a comment in the chat for you to write to me your gymnast age and their general training schedule, like hours, and kind of the gym policies around snacks and hydration. And at the very end, I'll do kind of a quick like hot seat coaching where I will run through all of your schedules and give you kind of off the fly, like what my recommendations would be. So yeah, you'll want to stay to the end. Fair warning, we might run a little bit over tonight, but I'm going to try to stay on time. And obviously, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat as well. This is a gymnast session, so your gymnast is welcome to be here. I know some gymnasts are obviously at practice, prepping for regionals, totally fine. They can catch the replay, but if season's over, they definitely could be here live. So your performance nutrition strategy. Ooh, that was bad noise. Okay. Is different than normal fueling, right? We've spent the first couple weeks really working hard on the performance plates, on meals and snacks that fuel us just really foundationally. So like if your kid wasn't a gymnast, we still would have 3 meals a day. We'd still have some snacks. Obviously, their meals look different when they're training a lot. We've got more carbs. They may have more frequent snacks, but a performance nutrition is something that we layer on top of that kind of foundational nutrition. And the great thing is that we can kind of peel it back, leave it out when they're not training. We're going to talk about pre-workout fueling, intra-workout, and hydration today. We go a little bit long because I also give you guys kind of the rundown on electrolytes and hydration products because we get a lot of questions about that. And then I say recovery nutrition for about session 5 when we talk more about recovery, injuries, inflammation, supplements, stuff like that. Your gymnast might be underfueled. They might have been underfueled when you started all of this. And it's true that your gymnast could be eating enough throughout the day, but they still could be underfueled going into the workout. And so if you have a gymnast who doesn't like breakfast is a huge struggle, they don't have a snack mid-morning that they need, they kind of have lunch, but it's not enough, maybe they kind of pick at their lunch, it's very possible that they could go into that workout underfueled, even though after the workout, they could eat a ton and they're probably starving and they make up maybe that deficit from earlier in the day, but it's still not ideal in terms of performance. So you might see signs like poor endurance. We struggle to get through bar routines, floor routines. They complain of having heavy legs as they're trying to run down the vault runway or as they're tumbling. They may have trouble focusing. And this is a really interesting one because sometimes I'll have coaches that will approach the parent and say, hey, I don't know what her deal is. She's not motivated. She's having a hard time focusing. Like maybe she's got ADHD. And it's like, no, she actually just is massively underfueled. And so the brain can't engage. It can't focus when it's just trying to keep the heart beating and the lungs breathing. And I will say if your gymnast has ADHD, that makes fueling even more challenging. And being underfueled can only exacerbate whether it's ADHD symptoms or anxiety or anything else going on psychologically because the brain has to have enough fuel. We will often see gymnasts get headaches at practice when they are underfueled and underhydrated. They also may get nauseous. They could have some shakiness, some dizziness, complain of just being kind of zoned out, kind of brain foggy. And then my favorite is what we call increased perceived exertion. So that's just a fancy way of saying all of a sudden everything feels way harder than normal. And if you've worked one-on-one with us, we typically will go through your gymnast gym schedule as well as their events and what skills they're doing and ask some pretty targeted questions of, okay, tell me about vault, easy event, hard event. If you vault at the beginning or at the end, are you more tired? We ask a lot of probing questions to really tease out how good your gymnast fueling is. And when I say good, I really mean adequacy, because these signs can really tell us a lot. And if your gymnast is feeling like this at practice, she is going to have a hard time really performing to the best of her ability. What's interesting is as you guys have learned more about fueling and carbohydrate, and obviously the more we're training, the higher the intensity of the training, the more the carbohydrate we need at practice, it makes sense, but we also need carbohydrate from a cognitive perspective. So this research study from a few years back, I think really highlights that. This study looked at the use of supplemental carbohydrate during practice, specifically for 12 to 14-year-old gymnasts training 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. So very similar to a lot of your gymnasts. They did an experiment where on 2 different days, on day 1, they did a really challenging beam workout with just water, which is probably similar to most of your gymnasts. And day 2, they did the beam workout with a carbohydrate beverage, which at first glance, I think a lot of us would think that that's excessive, right? Of like, why do you need carbs for beam? Beam is not that hard. Like, yes, it's hard from a technical skill perspective, but it's not necessarily like hard, exhausting, like vault or floor or something like that, right? But what they found was that the use of supplemental carbs during training actually reduced the mental and physical fatigue, AKA the wobbles, the balance checks, the falls, and carbohydrate supplementation can do a lot to boost the brain cognitively, as well as the body from a muscular kind of energy perspective. And so, people always want a silver bullet in terms of what can give my kid more energy, so on and so forth. Carbs. Like carbs are what give your gymnast energy. That is the gymnast fuel, especially during probably a 4 to 5+ hour workout, obviously depending on intensity and duration. There are some big differences though between snacking versus fueling, and I think this is where a lot of people get confused. When I ask a gymnast if they take a snack to practice, sometimes they'll say, no, I don't take anything because I'm not hungry. Or they'll say, yeah, I take a snack, but I only eat it if I'm hungry. And here's the deal. Snacking's great. I love it. Snacking is to bridge the gap between meals. We get a snack if we're hungry. Obviously, snacks can be very beneficial for gymnasts when we're trying to meet really high energy needs. But snacking is just that. Fueling, which is really the terminology I want you to use, especially in and around training, fueling is strategic. Fueling is about strategy. It's about looking at that practice and how long we're working out, at the intensity, and really figuring out at what point is my gymnast going to run out of fuel. And let's give them some fuel before that happens, because when they run out of fuel, their performance is going to go down. And we want your gymnast performance to be as consistent as possible, because that's what's going to separate them from their competition. Fueling is all about nutrient timing. So it's using the right foods at the right time to support their efforts in the gym. And it's has absolutely nothing to do with hunger versus no hunger. And here's the deal about training. Exercise is stressful on the body. That alone blunts the appetite. Exercise increases the core body temperature. That also makes you not hungry. And then a lot of gymnasts we work with, they're sometimes anxious at practice, or they're stressed out, or things are just super intense in the gym and they're not hungry. But that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be situations where their performance, their recovery, their cognition would very much benefit from intra-workout fuel. We're going to talk about a lot of things tonight. There are pre-workout meals and there are pre-workout snacks, and oftentimes we need both. A pre-workout meal is exactly what it sounds like. So it's the last meal that you have before training. For morning workouts, obviously breakfast is your pre-workout meal. If your gymnast is training at 4 p.m., lunch is probably her pre-workout meal. But because lunch is at 12 and gym's at 4, we're obviously going to need another snack before training. Pre-workout meals should be moderate to high intensity plates unless otherwise indicated. If it's a morning workout or morning competition, I really like to use a high intensity plate just because the body's fuel stores are not the same in the morning after fasting all night. So we're kind of depleted. We're kind of at a disadvantage because we haven't had a full day of fueling. But outside of that, probably for every other training session, it's moderate to high intensity based on your gymnast age, level, intensity, duration. And then if you've been instructed otherwise, i.e., you've got a young gymnast who's maybe only training 4 hours, that based on level, maybe a moderate intensity plate would be okay, but they're not growing, they're not developing, like something's going on. So we actually do need the boost of high intensity. Pre-workout snacks are exactly that. So these are snacks that we do 30 to 60 minutes before practice. The point of these are to top off the fuel stores to help us last as long as possible, right? If you're going to go on a road trip, the first thing you should do is fill your car with gas. The pre-workout snack is also going to help with hunger, right? A lot of our gymnasts train for 5+ hours a day, and that just gets long. And so we do want to fuel them up with a good snack so that we're not getting hungry in the middle of practice. Because if we're hungry in the middle of practice or we're starving right after practice, that tells me that we did not have enough fuel going into that training. The pre-workout snack is what I call an unbalanced snack. So it is mostly carbs, a little bit of protein to help us stay full, a little bit of fat, depending what time we're eating it. And that's probably it. Minimal fiber. We don't want veggies here. I would say probably 2 carb items. So this cheat sheet right here is from the Performance Nutrition Tool, which you'll find under the programs, on-demand trainings, and resources. So you want to pick probably 2 carb items. So like 1 piece of bread is 1 carb. A serving of fruit is 1 carb. So you've got a piece of bread with a little bit of fruit, and then we're going to add some fat or protein to that. So you put some peanut butter on your piece of bread, and there you go. We've got some fat, a little bit of protein, our carbs from the bread and the fruit. It's about 30 to 45 grams of carbohydrate, or 1 gram per kilo body weight is what we want pre-workout, really to fuel, top off the fuel tank. I like this snack eaten about 30 to 60 minutes before practice. I know a lot of gymnasts go straight from school to gym, and so they may only have like 10 minutes. Obviously, if they can eat it and they feel fine at gym, that's fine. I've had certain situations where I've actually needed the gymnast to eat her snack like during her last class period, and maybe even get a note to do so, just so that it has enough time to digest and settle before we start running and flipping and sprinting and jumping. I think it has a lot to do with just your gym and how intense the workouts are and how long it takes to kind of warm up and get into them. These are some other pages from that Performance Nutrition Tool. So we've got some visual examples of pre-workout snack ideas that your gymnast might like. And then I really encourage you to sit down with your gymnast and come up with like at least 3 examples. Performance nutrition is the same as your gymnast bringing her grips to gym, bringing her tiger paws to gym. Like this is part of her strategy and performance. So I really want your gymnast to take ownership here. I'm okay if your pre-workout snack is the same-ish every day. Like obviously I want variety in meals and snacks just to get different nutrients and different vitamins and stuff like that. But I want your performance nutrition to be consistent. And so, if your gymnast likes every day to have Greek yogurt, fruit, and granola, awesome. If they like a half a peanut butter jelly sandwich and a cheese stick and some fruit, awesome. Like, obviously they might get tired of it, so you're going to need some options, but I definitely want this to be routine and consistent. So to give you some examples of pre-workout timing, obviously on a rest day, we don't need a pre-workout snack. But let's say your gymnast is training from 4 to 8 p.m. We would have a pre-workout snack about an hour before, say 3 o'clock. It could be 3:30, as long as that's enough time for your gymnast to let the food digest. If your gymnast was having 2-a-day workouts, so let's say something crazy like 7 to 10 a.m. and then 3:30 to 6 p.m., pre-workout breakfast would really need to be about an hour before. And that is super important because if your gymnast is training that much that early, they're probably pretty high level and need a lot of fuel. And then obviously we'd have the first workout, then they have a lunch break. We would eat lunch, but then before that second workout from 3:30 to 6, we'd want a pre-workout snack at 3 because it's been 3+ hours since lunch. A couple more examples. Let's say your gymnast is training from 2:30 to 6:30 p.m. We would do probably a pre-workout, just a carb snack at 1:30. So this is an interesting schedule where because the workout's at like 2:30, which could be 2 hours from lunch, could be 3 hours from lunch. It really just depends on what time lunch is. If it's really close, like if it's within 2 hours of a meal, I don't expect a whole pre-workout snack with carbs and protein and all the things unless your gymnast needs it. I would probably expect just at least a little bit of a carb snack, kind of munch on a granola bar, or munch on something just to kind of top off their fuel stores. A schedule like this is really tricky because your gymnast needs to be on a schedule. Like they need to wake up on time, they need to eat on time in order to fit in enough nutrition. I have some gymnasts that train like from 1 to 5 or 1 to 5:30, and that's a really tricky schedule, which we'll talk more about. In the middle here, we've got an 8:30 to 1:30. So same thing, like that's a 5-hour workout. It is critical that your gymnast has a high intensity plate breakfast. A snack is not going to cut it. 1 piece of toast is not going to cut it. half a bagel with cream cheese is not going to cut it. Like, we need a full meal because we need to fuel into the workout. We need the protein to restart that repair recovery. And we also just need the nutrition, because by the time you get out of gym at 1:30, you get home at 2, like half the day is gone. And if all you've had is half a bagel with cream cheese, like your gymnast is massively behind on fueling, which is not only going to compromise their performance, but also their recovery. 1 to 5:30 p.m. workout, your gymnast needs to be on a schedule. So I would expect breakfast and lunch at minimum before training at that time. Depending on your gymnast and the situation and how good their meals are, they might need a mid-morning snack as well. Some of my college/elites have this kind of training schedule, and it is a real process to try to get them to wake up on time. And normally I can get like 9 a.m. breakfast, and then lunch has to be like noon. And it's not great because it's pretty close together, and then they don't want to eat lunch, but then their training's not good because they haven't had enough to eat. So you definitely want to think about like how long the training is lasting, to kind of use that as your gauge of like, okay, if we're training from 1 to 5, sure, your gymnast could sleep in and have brunch at 10:30 and would be fine-ish going into practice at 1. But if that's all they've had, they're going to be dying by like 3 or 4. So that can kind of clue you into how to adjust the timing. Like I said earlier, carbohydrates are the gymnast's fuel. It's what fuels every cell in the body. It fuels your brain, it fuels your muscles. And when we don't have enough carbs, that's when we feel tired and slow and sluggish. There's also some really interesting research that has just come out about carbohydrates and inflammation and bone health. And athletes who have low carbohydrate availability, who don't get enough carbs, especially in and around training, that actually can cause bone mass loss. So weakening of the bones, and that makes us more susceptible to stress fractures, stress reactions, that kind of thing. So when it comes to carbohydrate needs for exercise, like I said, pre-workout, we're looking at least 30 to 45 grams or a gram per kilo body weight. I know I don't teach calorie counting or stuff like that, but I do want you to make sure your gymnast is getting enough carbs. Intra-workout, this is where we kind of have to meld the art with the science, because every gymnast is different, every level is different, every gym is different, every schedule is different. So to give you some baseline, typical endurance sports like running, cycling, swimming, tennis, stuff like that, which tennis isn't an endurance sport, but it's usually long matches, you know what I'm saying. Those sports, we will typically recommend 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate after the first hour or 2 hours of exercise. So if you're going to go for an hour and a half run, you would run with probably just water or something for the first, hour. But then after that, you'd probably start to give yourself some carbs. Obviously, gymnastics is different because 4 hours of gymnastics is not the same as 4 hours of running, right? Like, we're not doing gymnastics for 4 hours. Like, we're standing around, we're waiting to take a turn, we're getting spotted, we're switching events, right? So if you think about a 4-hour workout, your gymnast is probably only on the equipment for maybe, I don't know, 2.5, maybe 3 hours. I'm going to go over a real quick biology lesson, because when I talk about carbs and intra-workout carbs and sugar, parents sometimes get worried because they've heard all sorts of stuff about insulin and blood sugar and all the things. So I want to give you a quick lesson of how the body deals with carbs. So carbohydrate, that is the food group that provides energy to the body. Things like rice, pasta, potatoes, beans, sugars, fruits. When you eat carbohydrate, they start to break down in your mouth. They continue breaking down in the stomach. From the stomach, they go into your intestines, and then they go into the bloodstream. When your body senses this rise in blood sugar, which is what carbohydrates break down into, they break down into sugar, what we call glucose. When your body senses this rise in glucose, it tells an organ in your body called the pancreas to make something called insulin. Insulin is like the key that opens the door to every cell in the body and allows that sugar, the glucose, the carbs, to go into the cell to be turned into energy, or what we call ATP, which some of my gymnasts might know from science class. Your body's really wise. And if you have a healthy functioning pancreas, AKA anyone who doesn't have diabetes, your body does a great job at sensing the carbs come in, producing the right amount of insulin to get the sugar into the cells, and then it stops producing to, keep things from dropping. During exercise, some really special stuff happens where every time your muscles are contracting, that allows them to soak up the carbs or the glucose, the sugar, like a sponge. And so when you think about really metabolically active muscle groups, so the muscle groups that just use a lot of the carbs for energy, those are things like your glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, right? These big, powerful muscle groups that we use a lot in gymnastics, especially with the really powerful explosive events. This is why when a gymnast is underfueled and they don't have enough carbs, they will feel tired. Their body will feel tired, sluggish, heavy, dizzy, shaky, right? These are all signs of the body not having the right fuel to use. Parents will sometimes worry about giving their gymnast like a sports drink or fruit snacks or some sort of sugar because they've heard things about, low blood sugar or a sugar crash. There are some really protective mechanisms against this during exercise. So when you are exercising, your body does not produce as much insulin because it wants to make sure that there's enough sugar in the bloodstream to keep levels stable while the muscles are taking all of it. So all that to say, it's a whole different ball game using a quick sugar or quick carb during training versus like sitting on the couch and drinking a 40-ounce soda, which is not something I'd recommend. Inside the performance nutrition tool, you'll find more guidance on the pre-workout meals and snacks, but I want to run through kind of what to do based on the timing, which this translates to competitions. So if you've got a morning workout, I really want you to eat breakfast, probably a high intensity plate. And this is something your gymnast is going to need to practice. I don't know anyone who's hungry at 6 or 6:30 in the morning, unless you just literally didn't have dinner or didn't eat enough the day before. Unfortunately, though, for a lot of our gymnasts, like that is their only window of opportunity to get adequate fuel. And so it just kind of is what it is. And I love using the illustration of conditioning and distress tolerance, right? Your gymnast knows how to do things that are hard, that are uncomfortable. And sometimes it's like that with fueling, especially when we've been underfueled, especially when we're not used to eating breakfast. Start small. If your gymnast doesn't eat anything, start with some carbs, then add some fat or protein to it, maybe add some liquid nutrition. Like the gut is trainable. So I don't necessarily expect your gymnast to be able to finish, a perfect high intensity plate off the bat. But it's definitely something that we can train the body to get used to. And it's a really critical part of your gymnast recovery and their performance, even if training is later in the day. If they're training midday, so let's say noon, I would really expect at least 2 meals. If your gymnast is training for 4 or 5 hours at noon, breakfast only is not enough. Breakfast and a snack is probably still quite not enough. So I'd really like to see 2 full meals, which means we got to wake up on time. I'd probably use a high intensity plate unless it's, lower levels and we don't need that. Then I would use more of a moderate intensity plate. To give you some examples, a turkey cheese sandwich on big bread could be more high intensity plus some peanut butter pretzels and grapes. If it's more moderate intensity, you can use the smaller, just square pieces of bread to lower the carbs. You could do like a rice bowl with shredded chicken, cheese, add some chips and salsa, tons of options. But the main thing with this timing is you need to think ahead. And again, if the workout's over at 4 or 4:30 and we've only had one meal going into the workout, we're just massively behind by the time gym's over. If we're training it closer to like 4, I would expect breakfast, lunch, and a pre-workout snack at minimum. Your gymnast might also need a mid-morning snack depending on their situation and what's going on, how well they do at their meals. This is where you'll use that cheat sheet. So at least probably 2, maybe 3 carb items, add a little bit of fat or protein, and that will get them through the rest of that workout. For evening workouts, which we definitely have gymnasts who train from 5 to 9 p.m., you can go either way. You could do an early dinner if you want at say 4 o'clock and then do a really generous post-workout snack when you pick them up at 9, or you could do a pre-workout snack if you prefer that or dinner's not ready and then eat dinner at 9 in the car. There's no problem with your gymnast eating at 9 o'clock. I would recommend you bring them dinner at that point because it is so late that they probably need to go to bed pretty soon. So I want them to be able to eat and then shower, get ready, go to bed. And obviously it depends how far you live from gym. But yeah, you've got options. If you do dinner before training, I would go easy on the veggies. You might need to go a little bit easy on the fat content, depending what's on the menu that night, just from more of a digestion and timing perspective. And so for that reason, you might just save dinner for after gym. The bottom line when it comes to a performance nutrition strategy is that the best strategy in the world, the best pre-workout, intra-workout snacks, hydration, electrolytes, none of that is going to really make a big difference if your gymnast is underfueled. So if they're skipping breakfast, it doesn't matter how good their pre-workout snack is. If they're only picking up their lunch at school, it doesn't matter, how fancy their snacks are at gym. And so really working on the basics, working on the performance plates, making sure they're getting enough. I mean, that's like 80 to 90% of your gymnast success. So the real hot topic is who needs food during gymnastics, right? I know when I was a gymnast training 4 to 5 hours a day, we didn't think that we needed a snack, right? It was only the little girls that needed a snack. I'd have teammates who would sneak snacks, and I always was like, what is your problem, right? Like, you can make it 4 hours. You don't need anything right now. And I had teammates who would bring candy to practice. And of course, I was like the healthy eater. So I was secretly judging them and like, oh my gosh, you're so unhealthy. I can't believe you're, eating candy. Yet the irony is they were better than me and they stayed healthier than me. And they didn't know what they were doing. They were just buying candy and eating it because their parents didn't let them have it and they had their licenses. But what they actually were doing unknowingly is they were giving their bodies a quick source of easy to digest carbohydrate during their training that helped them perform better. So when it comes to who needs what, if it's a brief workout, 45, 60 minutes, you're fine with water. If you're working out for 45 to 75 minutes and it's continuous exercise, like you're running for 75 minutes, you could benefit from some carb based on your performance, but that's a different story than gymnastics. For gymnastics, for our purposes, if it's a 3.5 hour workout or longer, I will definitely recommend some carbs. On some occasions for a 3-hour workout, I might recommend a little bit of a carb snack halfway through, really just depending on your gymnast, the intensity, and kind of what's going on. In general, though, for gymnasts, after that first 1.5 to 2 hours, I'm going to recommend about 15 or 20 grams of carbs every hour until gym is finished. So for most gymnasts, it's 1 or 2 snacks. Intra-workout nutrition is very different than anything else we've talked about. The snacks that we want for gym or the fuel that we want at gym needs to be carbs, simple carbs, so sugars, or lower fiber complex carbs like lower fiber fruits and grains. We want very little fat, protein, or fiber, unless it's a 5-hour workout or more, which I'll get to. These carbs could be food. They could be gels, they could be gummies, or they could be liquids. Obviously, if you use a liquid carbohydrate like a sports drink, that can double as part of your hydration as well as a fuel source, which we'll talk more about. The reason we want simple carbs, the reason that it's okay to use sugars during a workout is because blood flow is really limited during exercise. Your body is using that blood flow to the muscles, to the brain, like it is not focused on digestion. So if you were to eat something with a bunch of fat and fiber and protein, it's just going to sit in your stomach. It's not going to be able to break down fast enough and even be the right source of fuel. A lot of gymnasts who I work with who object to eating something during training, it's normally because when they've tried previously, they've just not brought the right foods. Like they've had a protein bar, or they've had beef jerky, or they've had a bunch of almonds or carrots and hummus. And it's like, those are fine snacks, but those are not going to digest and settle as they need to. This is one of my favorite pages from the Performance Nutrition Tool, where it shows the different categories of intra-workout carbohydrates. The beauty of this is you and your gymnast get to choose. And so if you want to use fruit, awesome. Fresh fruit, dried fruit, doesn't matter. If you want to use starchy carbs, so things that are made of grains, so things like pretzels, goldfish, graham crackers, oat-based granola bars, great, more power to you. You can use the simple sugars, things like fruit snacks, gummies, gummy-based candy. I do have an asterisk by that because we do want to maximize nutrition as able, right? So if your gymnast is short in the fruit department, then I would say, yes, let's take some fruit to gym. If they're a pretty good fruit and veggie eater, then I would say, sure, let's take your favorite gummy candy and, 15 or 20 grams of carb of that is fine. If your gymnast loves gummy candy or fruit snacks, then gym could be a really nice chance to enjoy those. Not that you can't have them any other time, but it could be very strategic using those during a practice. Liquid carbs is the last category. So sports drinks, which we'll talk about, those are technically 6 to 8% carbohydrate solutions. And then you could use a little bit of fruit juice as well. Like I said, I don't love to count things, but I do want to make sure your gymnast is getting enough carbs. So a real quick lesson on a food label. You've got the serving size, which is arbitrary. You could need more, you could need less, but this is a food label from pretzels. So, little pretzels, 17 of them is the serving. If you go down to total carbohydrate, that tells us how many carbs are in a serving. So big handful of pretzels, 17 pretzels, 23 grams of carb. It does not have to be an exact serving. We're just trying to get close. So I would consider that one carb snack. Other examples of one carb snack would be like a serving of fruit, like a banana, a little baggie of grapes, a handful of dried mango. All of those in my mind is like one carb snack. The applesauce pouches that everyone loves, those are kind of a half a snack-ish, like they're only 12 grams of carb. So that might not quite be enough for some gymnasts to really be like a full snack. Starchy carbs. So again, a little chewy granola bar, it's about 20 grams of carb. That's one snack. Nature Valley granola bar could be closer to 30 carbs. That's fine. Still about one snack, maybe a little bit more. Individual baggie of pretzels or goldfish, probably 20 or 30 grams of carbs. Again, about one snack. The simple sugars. So a little packet of fruit snacks, oh gosh, probably 20 grams of carb, one carb snack, 10 gummy bears, that's 20 grams of carb, right? So again, I don't need you to be crazy with this, but I do want to make sure your gymnast gets enough. Liquid carbs, so the little baby bottles of Gatorade, those are 20 grams of carbohydrate. The bigger, like 20-ounce bottles of Gatorade are 30 grams. And then there are some kind of boutique products like Scratch, which is a powder, and one scoop equals 20 grams of carb. I will say that parents, when they do a sports drink, they often send way too much. Like I'll be working with a family and they're like, oh yeah, she's taking Gatorade to practice. And it's like, how much? And it's like, oh, 32 ounces. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think we need 60 grams of carb from Gatorade, right? Like 12 ounces of Gatorade is fine for one snack. And then let's take a fruit with it, or let's take something else that like at least has a little bit of nutrition if they can fit it in. And obviously, I have gymnasts where snacks aren't allowed. And so their only option is to bring a sports drink in a bottle like this where no one knows what it is. And I hate that. Like I hate that we're having to sneak something in, but obviously the priority is for your gymnast to be fueled. So here is the general guideline. If your gymnast has a 3-hour workout, maybe one snack, but maybe they don't need anything at all. And so this might be where you experiment based on their energy, their performance, their focus, so on and so forth. If it's a 3.5 to 4-hour workout, definitely 1 to 2 carb snacks on the lower end for less intense lower levels, on the upper end for more intense, so on and so forth. I've got some senior elite gymnasts who train 3.5 hours a day. I promise you, they are fitting in 5 hours of training in 3.5 hours. So for them, 2 carb snacks versus a level 4 or 5 training 3.5 hours a day, 1 snack is probably sufficient unless the gym is just absolutely crazy, go, 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 whatever. 4.5 to 5 hour workout, probably 2 to 3-ish snacks. Again, could be just 30 grams of carb, could be up to 60. Start somewhere and see how your gymnast does. I think we'll talk about this. It's important to distribute the snacks during the workout. So you don't want to eat them all at once. Your body can't handle that super well. Remember, digestion is not the priority during exercise. So we want to take small bites of the carbs throughout the training. So your gymnast is good for the first 1.5 to 2 hours. Water is fine. But after that, split up the 1 or 2 snacks throughout the rest of practice, like just between rotations is fine. If they have a 5-hour practice, this is where I'll break my own rules and I'll let them have a little bit of fat or protein because it's just getting long, but not a lot, just like peanut butter pretzels or a cheese stick plus their carb snacks or a little yogurt plus their carbs or a few pieces of beef jerky plus their carbs, right? I'm just trying to give them a little bit of protein and fat just because it's getting long. Some examples, so 8 to 1 p.m. would be 5 hours. So gym starts at 8. We've had breakfast at 7. Probably about 10 a.m., so 2 hours into the workout, we have a few bites of our granola bar, or we start taking a few sips of our sports drink, maybe 10:30, 10:45. So after that next event, maybe your gym does give a break and they're calling it the lunch break. I wouldn't bring a lunch here because your kid's probably not going to eat all of it. I would just have one of the carb snacks with a little bit of fat and protein at that point. And then after the next event, after break, we finish up the rest of the carbs to get us through that last hour. And then obviously have a good post-workout lunch, a snack, and dinner. Let's say your gymnast is 4 to 8 p.m. training. We've got breakfast, probably a mid-morning snack. We've got lunch. Then we've got that pre-workout snack, 3 to 3:30. Then gym starts at 4, so we're fine with water until about 6. And then at 6, we start munching on some carbs. At 7, we munch on some more carbs, and then gym's over at 8. One more example, so a 2 a day. So 7 to 10 a.m. morning workout, 3 hours. Probably I would do a little bit of carbs here, 10 to 15 grams, because more than likely if your kid's doing 2 a days, they're probably pretty high level and it's pretty intense. And so it's the morning, it's early, breakfast might have been a struggle. So I definitely would do at least something halfway through. Then post-workout snack right after gym, lunch, pre-workout snack before the next workout. And then that next workout, 3:30 to 6 is 2.5 hours. So again, it's just kind of right on the bubble. I might do a little bit of carbs because again, most of my gymnasts who train like this, like their elite track, the level 9 and 10s, like it's so difficult to get enough fuel in them that that's kind of a separate conversation. Okay, so let me know if you have questions about that. And like I said, at the end, I'll kind of go through your schedule and recommendations. But my goal is that you leave this session with a good idea of, okay, we need 1 snack, we need 2 snacks. This is what they're already doing, it's good. Or, hey, we need to tweak some stuff. In terms of hydration, the bottom line is most gymnasts don't drink enough. And hydration is super important, not just to help regulate your temperature, right? But your muscles are mostly fluid. Fluid helps to transport nutrition and remove the bad stuff. So very important that your gymnast drinks enough. We want to drink throughout the day, so we can't just chug a bunch of water before practice and call it good. All fluids do count in terms of hydration. So sometimes I'll have parents tell their gymnasts, well, Diet Coke doesn't count, or coffee doesn't count, or juice doesn't count. That's not true. Like if we're going to be technical, any fluid, it's still water, even if it's coffee or even if it's a sports drink, like it still counts towards hydration. I am not telling your gymnast to drink coffee, but we're just being factual here about fluids. There are 2 methods to calculate how much fluid your gymnast needs. So the first method I like to use for really small prepubescent gymnasts because I find that the other method really underestimates it for them. So this is called the Holiday-Seeger equation. You can Google Holiday-Seeger equation, like maintenance fluid calculator pediatrics. You'll put their weight in probably in kilos, and then it spits out, how much they need in a 24-hour period. I will link to this in the Facebook group and we can practice if you need help. It's complicated, it's metrics, so you'll have to convert it back to ounces, but I do prefer this method. It's what we use clinically in the hospital. It's what we use for pediatrics. For all of us right now, we can use the sports nutrition quick method, which is half your body weight in ounces. That's how much fluid you need per day outside a gym. Like this is just for normal people. So let's say your gymnast is 100 pounds. Tell me in the chat, how much fluid, how many ounces would she need a day? Again, we're not talking about gym yet, but how much would she need a day if she was 100 pounds? Tell me in the chat. Bet you guys didn't know you're doing some math tonight. 50 ounces. Good job. Exactly. So she weighs 100 pounds, cut it in half, 50 ounces. Let's say your gymnast is 60 pounds. How much fluid would a 60-pound gymnast need just as a normal person? And you can use the sports nutrition quick method. I won't make you use the complicated one. 60 pounds, how many ounces a day? There we go. 30 ounces, exactly. That is definitely on the low end. If you use the Holiday-Seeger equation, just probably off the top of my head, it's probably closer to 40 ounces at least. So again, that's why for small gymnasts like that, I really want to use this first equation. What should your gymnast be drinking? Mostly water. Next, I would say 2 to 3 cups of milk or plant milk. The reason I like that is to get the calcium. It's really difficult to get enough calcium, which we've talked a little bit about and we'll talk more about. But if we include some milk, that definitely takes a stab at it. Sports drinks are only for really intense workouts. So sports drinks are not just for fun because they contain a lot of sugar. So they're really more for intra-workout. When it comes to fruit juice, I definitely prefer the whole fruit just to get more fiber, nutrients, vitamins. But when you have a gymnast who's struggling to get enough nutrition, we have a high intensity play and we're struggling to finish it, a liquid carbohydrate like juice could be really strategic for them. When it comes to coffee and energy drinks, they're not recommended for under 17 years old. I have never recommended these to a gymnast because when gymnasts are tired and low on energy, it's often a fuel or sleep issue. And even my senior elite gymnast who, if they wanted to use caffeine strategically for their workouts, I would let them. They don't. Unless it's a morning workout, they're not doing energy drinks for the afternoon or evening because obviously caffeine can amp up the nerves, it can make you shaky, and obviously as a gymnast, like we don't need any more help with that when we're trying to do balance beam or something like that, right? The reality is that most gymnasts don't drink enough. They don't drink enough because they're just not thirsty. They don't want to be bloated or sloshy. They don't want to feel heavy. They don't want to have to go to the bathroom at school. They don't want to go to the bathroom at gym. We know from the research that 75% of young athletes show up to practice already underhydrated, and it can have a big impact on their cognition and their performance. As little as 2% body weight loss from dehydration, it's going to impair aerobic performance, so think endurance. And it's also going to lead to poor cognitive performance, so mood and emotion regulation, fatigue, and then motor skills, which very important for gymnastics. Signs that we are not getting enough: increased body temp, increased heart rate, increased perceived exertion, so everything is feeling super hard all of a sudden. Poor appetite after practice. This can be from dehydration. Muscle cramps could be fluid related, but could be electrolyte or neuromuscular. Nausea and headache. Anytime I have gymnasts with headaches, we usually can get a hold of them with adequate fueling, adequate minerals, electrolytes, adequate carbohydrate availability, adequate fluid. Usually does the trick, unless there's something else going on. How do you know if your gymnast is drinking enough? This is really crude, but we actually post pictures like this in the bathroom of collegiate locker rooms because looking at your urine color can be a really easy way to see whether or not you're hydrated. It's not a perfect method, but it's a great one for your gymnast. We want your urine or pee to be lemonade or lighter. It does not need to be clear like water all the time. Like that is not the goal. Most of us, when we wake up in the morning, our urine is more yellow. It's more concentrated because you've been sleeping all night and your body's been concentrating your pee because you're not going to the bathroom. So obviously the first time you go in the morning, it's going to be maybe a 3-ish. It's going to be darker. It'll be very yellow if you're taking any vitamins that have B vitamins. So that's a little bit different. But for most of us, it'll be a little bit more yellow. But as you start hydrating, it should become lighter. When I have gymnasts who can go the whole school day with only going to the bathroom one time or none, we're not drinking enough. You should need to go to the bathroom at least every couple hours. And honestly, as an athlete, to truly be hydrated, you might have to go to the bathroom after every class, depending how long the class is, right? And that just in and of itself is a huge barrier to gymnasts drinking enough because teachers don't want to let them go to the bathroom, or they've lost bathroom privileges because kids have been bad at school, or just I'm telling you, I hear all sorts of crazy stuff where I'm like, oh my goodness, I just need this kid to eat enough and drink enough. And the school situation sometimes makes it really difficult. So that's where I'll write a letter. We'll get a hold of the nurse. Like we'll meet with the principal. Like we'll do what we need to make sure that your gymnast can eat and drink. In terms of how much your gymnast needs during exercise, we have this super handy chart inside the performance nutrition tool. This is based on body weight because that relates to their blood volume, which relates to how much they need to drink. This last column here is for during gym, so intro workout. Your gymnast needs about 2 to 3 good gulps of water or whatever they're drinking every 20 minutes. That's not that much, but it can be difficult. Per hour, again, it's based on body weight. So if you look at this chart here, if your gymnast is 80 pounds, that's 12 ounces an hour. If they're 120 pounds, that's 18 ounces an hour. I find these calculations high because, again, gymnastics is not a continuous sport. Like we're not running for 4 hours. There's a lot of stopping and starting. So go ahead and calculate what your gymnast needs for their 3 or 4 or 5 hour practice, but then I would shoot for like 70, 80% of that as a starting place. And I know most of the time when I work with gymnasts, they're drinking maybe half of what they need at gym. So you just need to start setting small goals of if your gymnast needs 48 ounces at gym and she's only getting 16, let's set a goal to hit 20, every day next week. I'm a big fan of having some sort of bottle that they take with them that is super easy to drink out of. This one is actually, I don't know if I would recommend it for intra workout necessarily because you have to screw off the top. It has an open lid. I will say that this spout is smaller, so it is easy to drink out of quickly. This sounds crazy, but we've got to reduce all the barriers. So my favorite bottle, which I don't currently have on me, but I did picture it here, is the Camelback Eddie. It's a plastic bottle with a soft spout that when you pour it upside down, it won't spill, which obviously keeps the gym happy. But it's just super easy to drink out of, and it's not super heavy, and you're not having to unscrew everything. And as crazy as that sounds, I think sometimes gymnast bottles, they're just too difficult to deal with, so they don't drink out of them. So find a straw bottle, find something that's quick for your gymnast. Let's do some more math. So I want you to calculate how many ounces your gymnast needs for their practice. And I'll give you an example. So I'll put it in the chat. I'm going to say, you've got a 100-pound gymnast training 4 hours. How many ounces does she need during the 4 hours? Okay. So she weighs 100 pounds. So look at the chart, 15 ounces per hour. We're training 4 hours. So 15 ounces times 4 hours. How many ounces does that equal? Boom, 60. Ha, I love it. We got a math teacher here. So 60 ounces, that's a lot. So again, if we shoot for maybe 80% of that, what's 75 or 80% of 60? You guys didn't know you're doing math tonight. What is 75 or 80% of 60 ounces? Exactly, 45 to 50 ounces. Perfect. This bottle right here, this is a Yeti. I think it's 18 ounces. So I'd probably recommend something a little bit bigger. Like if your kid needs 48 ounces, they'd have to do too many of these. So I'd probably send them with like a 30-ounce bottle and say, look, you got to finish all of this by 6 o'clock, you need to refill it, and you need to have half of it finished by the time I pick you up. So I think setting some really tangible goals with your gymnast with kind of visual cues, that can really help them get what they need. Hydration's important, but when your gymnast isn't eating enough and you're just struggling to get breakfast in, you're struggling to get snacks at gym, I'm going to put a lot more effort onto that before attacking hydration, because while hydration is super important, we're going to have bigger problems if we're underfueled, unless we're already having headaches or something like that. This is a really tough convo. A lot of gyms don't allow gymnasts to get a drink except for between events from the locker room. Or they have a water fountain that they could get a drink from during events, but the gymnasts don't want to drink from it because the water is gross or it's dirty or it's halfway across the gym or it's always busy, right? Like I hear all of it. Your gymnast really needs to have their bottle with them during a rotation because otherwise it makes it really difficult to get enough fluid. And here's the example. If your gymnast needs 64 ounces of fluid during a 4-hour practice, so we're talking, 120, 150 pound teenage level 10 gymnast, right? If they only drink 4 to 6 ounces between each event, at best that's 20 or 30 ounces, right? Like that's less than 50% of what they need. They're just not going to drink more than that because they're going to get a stomach cramp. They're going to feel sloshy. Like it's just not going to happen. Versus if they're allowed to have their bottle during practice and take 2 drinks from it, right? Like I'm on the team with the coaches. I do not want them wasting time. I don't want them making a mess. But in a 45 or 60-minute beam rotation, your gymnast could get 2 really good, gulps, sips of water, like, at 2 times during that rotation. If we add that into drinking between events, now we have a lot better chance of meeting our hydration needs. Coaches aren't trying to be malicious. They're not trying to be abusive. When this situation happens, they just don't really understand how much fluid gymnasts really need. And then in their minds, they're trying to protect the equipment. They don't want bugs. They don't want spills. They maybe had previous problems with that. And so I think it's absolutely within the right of the coach to say, if you're going to have water on the floor, it has to be a no spill bottle. It can only be water, like can definitely have parameters around it. I've had gyms where instead of it being in the locker room, they have a table, in the middle of the equipment. That way it's just a lot easier to get to and the gymnasts aren't wasting time. And then I have some gyms that after COVID, they stopped using the locker room. And so the girls just carry their bags from event to event. And that can also make it easy to access their hydration. Sometimes a gymnast might need more than just water. So after 2 hours of intense exercise, like running, cycling, those kinds of sports, we often need more than just water because at that point we've lost so much of our main electrolytes through sweat, sodium, potassium, chloride, that if you just keep drinking plain water, it can't get where it needs to go in the body to really keep you hydrated. Electrolytes are kind of like what opens the toll booths, right? So you think about the highway and the toll roads, which these days I think everyone has like an electronic toll tag, but electrolytes, specifically sodium and then sugar, that's like what opens the toll booths and allows the fluids to get into your body. The reason that Gatorade was developed is because when you are playing football in the heat of the Florida summer, you're going to sweat so much that even if you're drinking water, it's going to come a point where you're actually still dehydrated because the water can't get where it needs to go because we have lost this electrolyte balance. The sugar and the salt helps with that absorption of fluid from your intestines into your bloodstream. So this is why Gatorade was developed. The original sports drink was actually developed, I believe, in the UK called Lucozade. There are 1,000,001 products on the market. That makes it very confusing. So I'm going to break it down real quick. Electrolyte only products do not have carbs. They only have electrolytes. They often have a good amount of sodium, 300 to 500 milligrams. They usually have some potassium, maybe 100 to 200 milligrams or less. They might have a little bit of chloride, maybe a little bit of calcium and magnesium. That's about it. So things like the non-sport tablets, LMNT, Gatorlyte Zero. So any of the zero drinks don't have carbs. They just have electrolytes. Gatorade Zero, Body Armor Light. Prime is a perfect example of electrolytes only, but it actually really doesn't even qualify for that because it doesn't have any sodium. And if you are needing it for hydration, like if you were sweating so much, sodium is the most important thing that we need to replace to maintain blood pressure and keep away headaches and stuff like that. So it's really, Prime really just has a bunch of potassium and some other random B vitamins. Body Armor Light is the same thing. It's made of coconut water, which is potassium based. It does not have any additional sodium. So by itself, like, may not be the best choice. When to use something like this? You could use it prior to gym. if your gym is super hot, if where you live is super hot and humid, if your gymnast is a super heavy sweater, if they have dizziness, headaches, POTS-like symptoms, definitely something to kind of chat through. I'm not recommending this to everyone. The next category, which is kind of a hybrid between electrolyte only and a sports drink, it has a lot of electrolytes, but it doesn't have as much of the carbs. So something like Liquid IV has a ton of electrolytes, more than Gatorade, pretty high sodium, but has about half the carbs as a sports drink. Liquid IV, drip drop, none instant hydration, all of those kind of have the same composition. They're actually technically what we call oral rehydration solutions. And this is what you would give someone if they're vomiting, or if they have a super high fever, or if they're in the hospital and they're not allowed to eat for a couple days. Like, this is the electrolyte profile we would give them just to maintain their blood sugar and keep them hydrated. Who might need something like this? On occasion, I'll have gymnasts who need these outside of practice. Usually those situations are tons of stress, we're losing minerals, GI conditions, post-concussion syndrome related headaches, POTS-like symptoms. Again, this is definitely something I'd recommend in the context of a one-on-one situation. And then we have sports drinks. So 6 to 8% carbohydrate solution. So for a little baby Gatorade bottle, about 20 grams of carb, 200-ish milligrams of sodium, about half of that potassium. Tailwind is kind of a fancy endurance powder fuel that, again, I think it's maybe 25 grams a scoop, just depends on the type. Scratch is one of my favorites. So it doesn't have food dye. It's got a very mild taste. It's actually made locally in Boulder. A lot of my gymnasts really like it. 1 scoop is 20 grams of carbs. So that's 1 carb snack. And it's got not as much electrolyte as Liquid IV, but more than Gatorade. So it's kind of a nice in the middle. Body Armor and coconut water, people will say that these are the healthy sports drinks. They're not sports drinks because they don't contain sodium. They're really just sugary liquids with potassium. And so if you're going to use something like that and your gymnast is sweating a lot, or we're having some sort of symptoms, you either need to add salt or make sure they have a salty snack with it. There's other products like the Clean Athlete electrolytes that also have carbs in them. Who needs a sports drink? I like to use real food as much as possible at training, but obviously there are situations where maybe food's not allowed, your gymnast doesn't want to eat, we don't have time. And so it might be strategic to use some portion of a sports drink to get some carbs in them. Obviously, the real food is going to give us more nutrients, more vitamins, more nutrition. But again, this is really kind of case by case. It's not good to bathe the teeth in acid, which sports drinks are acidic. So that's why, I don't want your gymnast drinking a sports drink for 4 hours. They really only need it after that first 2 hours. I actually have a super great podcast episode coming up about this, about like cavities and sports drinks and stuff like that. The bottom line is try to minimize it, try to contain it, rinse with water, make sure you're brushing your teeth. Like, some of this is just unavoidable, but we want to be smart about it. So in summary, we've talked about a lot. Your gymnast needs a performance nutrition strategy. Depending on the level and the intensity of their training, every gymnast is going to have some degree of this, right? Every gymnast needs a pre-workout meal or snack. Intra-workout's really based on intensity, duration of training. Post-workout we'll cover in session 4 or 5. And there's just a lot of options. So it's really about tolerance and preference. We're going into upgrade season, so this is a great time to experiment and figure out what your gymnast prefers. I really want your gymnast to take ownership, just like they would not forget their grips at practice. I want them to be in charge of their performance fuel. Some gymnasts will notice an immediate benefit from this. Some don't. And some don't until they don't do it anymore. So I often find that my younger gymnast, you'll send them with the carbs, they'll eat them, you'll ask them if they feel better, and they're like, no. But then one day they don't bring their snacks, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I actually didn't need that. I actually did feel better. So again, experiment, see what happens, ask for help, and go from there. Your homework is to figure out pre-workout meals, which obviously right now could be breakfast, could be lunch, could be pre-workout snack, depending on your gymnast schedule. I want you to work on your performance nutrition strategy. I want you and your gymnast to calculate hydration. I want to make sure that you have a bottle to drink from that is easy to drink. I want you to figure out what snacks you need at practice, and then we'll go from there. So, next session in 2 weeks is all about underfueling, labs, growth, development, puberty. It's absolutely my favorite session. It's honestly probably one of the most enlightening sessions for parents. So be there, be square. And then after that, we'll have injuries, inflammation, supplements, and then we'll be done. So crazily, we're halfway through. Time is flying, but it's been awesome. So with that, you're free to go if you want. If you told me what your training schedule is, you're going to see my brain start to flame in a second with on the fly telling you my recs, but everyone loves it. And then I'm going to answer questions as I get to them. Okay. So Clara, 12-year-old level 8, currently training 3:30 to 7:30, 5 days a week. So 4 hours, 3 to 4, yeah, 4 hours. They're allowed a snack. I would do at least one snack, 20 or 30 grams, might do another little 10 or 15 grams. I would start carbs about 5:15, 5:30 and split them up between events. You've got options in terms of what the carbs are. Sounds like the gym is amenable. Teresa, 15-year-old, training level 9, 4 hours, allowed a snack. So about the same kind of thing. And again, you kind of base this on how intense the workouts are. Probably somewhere between 1 to 2 snacks, 15 to 20 grams each. I would start carbs at 5:15, I'm sorry, 6:15, 6:30, and then continue between the rest of events. Jen and Alexis, 16-year-old level 9, 4:15 to 8:15. So 4 hours. Snack is allowed, but doesn't always eat it. So yeah, probably at that level, as long as there's some intensity there, at least one snack. And I'd be real curious to experiment and see what we feel like in terms of performance, mood, energy, how she is when you pick her up or she comes home, stuff like that. Same thing. I'd start carbs about 2 hours in, 6:15, and then split them up between the rest of events. Liz says 16 years old, 4 days a week, 5 to 8. So 3 hours, no snack breaks, just water. So she could experiment with maybe one snack in the 3 hours and see what she needs. And if it helps, great. And if not, then water could be sufficient based on pre-workout snacks and kind of sufficiency of fueling. And yeah, no problem. She can certainly watch the replay. Maya and Shauna, 14-year-old level 7, so 4 hours. Yes, I would do at least one carb snack at level 7, depending on intensity of the gym. If the gym is a little bit more relaxed, one snack, kind of 20, 30 grams, split up between events might be great. Could experiment with a little bit more than that and kind of see how things go. McKenna, 9 years old, 4 hours, 4 days a week. Remind me what level she is. Can have a snack for up to 10 minutes and brings a bottle around all the time. Beautiful. So depending what level, if it's 4 hours, definitely one snack, maybe 1 to 2 snacks. I will say, and I'm not talking about you necessarily, but there are situations where, like, if a gymnast is really struggling with growth and development and they're really underfueled, that is also a situation where I might increase the snacks at gym simply to just get more fuel in them, even though it may technically be more than they need based on that kind of workout. So that's also kind of a different situation. Let's see, level 9, 18, 4 hours, Monday through Thursday, and then softball, snacks when needed. So yeah, for 4 hours, I would say probably 1.5-ish snacks at least, depending, again, intensity, duration, how well we fueled. I would start snacks, 2 hours into practice and kind of go from there. Laura, 15-year-old, level 6 to 9, allowed a snack, and then also dances. So yeah, 3 hours, level 6. You could start with 1-ish snack and kind of see how we do. Again, it really depends on the gym, level, intensity, duration. It could kind of go either way in terms of needing a snack or not. Just, again, depending on kind of like the active gymnastics time. Becky, 16-year-old, level 9, 1:30 to 6. So, oh gosh, I think that's 4.5 hours. I would probably do at least pretty close to 2 snacks, like a little granola bar and some fruit. And I would split it up between events starting at 3:15, 3:30. And that's so exciting. We have a lot of regionals coming up. Rebecca, 14, level 7, training 5 to 9, so 4 hours, a quick snack while at bars, but doesn't get to eat it usually. So yes, this might be something you have a discussion about of, hey, let's take a pack of fruit snacks and you can eat 5 of them while putting your grips on and eat the other 5 when you take your grips off, right? Like sometimes we have to get that kind of strategic, but I think habit stacking can be really helpful of like, when I put my grips on, I eat half my fruit snacks. When I take them off, I eat the other half. I don't know what time bars is. Hopefully it's like after about 6:30 or 7, because we really don't need the carbs before then. But again, I think you do the best you can with where you can start. Carmen, let's see, gymnast 12 to 4:30. Snacks are allowed after conditioning and at the end. I wonder what times those are. If it were up to me, I would say probably 2-ish carb snacks, 1.5 to 2, starting them at 2 p.m. and then finishing between the rest of events. So hopefully conditioning is like about 2, and then maybe a little bit before that last rotation at like 3:30 or something. Annette, 15 for 3 hours, 4.5 days a week. Don't love snacks. So I think depends on the level. I would probably do at least one small snack, which maybe it's like a little bit of a liquid carb or a little handful of dried fruit or a little bit of something, and experiment and kind of see how she does. Claudia, 10-year-old, level 7, doesn't like to snack, not allowed to bring colored drinks into practice. Yeah. So, I'm assuming, I don't know how many hours. I'm assuming 4-ish, probably at least. Probably does need 1.5 to 2-ish snacks. You might have to get creative and use kind of an opaque bottle where they don't know what it is. The good thing about Scratch, the product I showed, it doesn't have food dye. So you actually could mix it in like a bottle, and obviously it'll be maybe like a little bit cloudy, but it's not red Gatorade, right? Which I think is usually the issue, is they don't want red Gatorade on the carpet, which I can't fault the coaches for that. But yeah, probably definitely needs some nutrition, especially at that age, at that level. And I think just off the top of my head, what gym you're at. Krista, level 7, level 8, almost 25 a week. 15-minute break and food is encouraged. Fast snacks are fine during practice. Great. If you want to throw in what time they train, I can give you some recs. Probably at level 7 and 8 though, based on their training hours, it's probably 4 to 5 hours a day. So definitely like close to 2-ish carb snacks. Starting after that first kind of 1.5 to 2 hours, just depending where they are in terms of events. Raven, level 6, 13, 3:45 to 6:15. So, oh gosh, 2 hours and 30 minutes. And then one day it's 2 hours, it's over 2, it's 3 hours, 3 hours, 15 minutes. For the shorter workouts, probably fine with just water. For that one Friday workout, might need a little bit of carbs, at like 5:45-ish to get her through the rest of training. So again, something to kind of experiment with. Jana, 13-year-old, level 9, 4 hours a day, no snacks allowed. So yes, in your situation, if no one else is like sneaking snacks, then we might need to try to find a little bit of a fruit juice or a liquid carb like Scratch. Bring 2 bottles. So still have her bottle of water, because most gymnasts want to drink plain water, which is fine. But then maybe bring a little bottle that has, 12 ounces of Scratch, which 1 scoop of the powder is mixed with 12 ounces and it's 20 grams of carbs. Probably still on the low end, but it's a good place to start and definitely something we'll work on. Someone said, does almond milk count for calcium? Yes. So all plant milks for the most part, unless you're making it yourself, but if it's store-bought, like almond milk, cashew milk, soy milk, they all pretty much are fortified with calcium. So yes, it counts for that. They may not have the protein, so just make sure they're getting what they need from that standpoint. Alice, let me know if I answered your question about sports drinks and electrolytes, since we kind of went through that. Let me know. Yeah. Mickey, 1:30 to 5:30, so 4 hours, right? Yes, 4 hours. So at her level 10, I know your gym is super intense. Probably 1.5 snacks at least, starting at 3:30 and finishing between events. And then for her 3-hour day, I think 1 snack is probably sufficient, starting at 3:15, 3:30, just to kind of get her through that last part of gym. Probably 3, halfway through. Alice, 13-year-old level 8, 5 days a week, 4 hours is a lot of fast snack. 3:15 to 7:15. So yes, I would do 1.5-ish snacks, might need 2, depending what's happening with growth and stuff like that. And I would start them at about 5:15, and then munch on them between events. Mickey said regionals competes at 6:30. Suggestions for the day usually works out from 1:30 to 5:30. Yeah, so I would work backwards. So if regionals is at 6:30, I would do her last meal as close to that as possible. So probably 5-ish, maybe 4:30. And I would try to do like a high intensity plate just because it's going to be a long night. Then I'd work back from that and do probably a late lunch at maybe 1-ish. And then maybe a little bit of a mid-morning snack. And then I'd let her sleep in for sure. So breakfast could be maybe 9, unless she's up earlier. So definitely breakfast, definitely a late lunch. Depending how early you do that pre-workout meal, you might need another little snack before 6:30. But yeah, definitely feel free to post that in the Facebook group and we can kind of like chat more through that if needing some more ideas. Jamie, level 4-5, 3 hours, 3 days a week. And then Saturdays are 4 hours. Snacks are not encouraged. So level 4-5 is tough. I think for 3 hours could be fine with just water. Might be something that you pay attention to just in terms of how is her mood after training. If she's Miss Cranky Pants, we might need, number one, we might need more fuel during the day, but then we also just might need a little bit of something, halfway through gym. For the 4 hours, might need a little bit of something, because even though at level 4-5, it's not that intense, at that age, their bodies just can't hold on to carbs the same as older adults can. And so she could just be burning through it and could benefit from a little something. Oh, you're good, Krista. 2:30 to 7, so 4.5 hours. Yeah, so probably close to 1.5, 2 carb snacks starting at like 4:30 and splitting up between events. Alice, 3:15 to 7:15, 4 hours, really struggling on floor snacks allowed, but not encouraged. Yeah, so definitely like 1 snack at minimum to start, probably needs closer to 1.5, maybe even 2. And then could be underfueling overall though. So if that doesn't solve the issue, then it could be just underfueling throughout the day, low iron, like could be other issues at play. Regionals, Krista, level 7 at 11:30. And then level 8 also at 11:30. That's convenient. So yes, 11:30. I would really like to see breakfast and an early lunch, probably, just knowing it's probably going to be a long meet. So I would try to get them up and have breakfast at a normal time, like school morning time. So probably 7:30-ish, maybe 8 at the latest. If breakfast is at 8, they're realistically not going to want to eat probably hardly anything at 10:30 or 11. And so, yeah, I would say breakfast and a really good pre-workout snack at minimum, which I kind of gave you the formula for that tonight. But yeah, I think getting up on time is key, because if that meet goes 3.5, 4 hours, it's just a long time. Let me know if that helps. And then Laura, level 6 regionals begin at noon. What should I give her? So same kind of situation. You at least have a little bit later. But I would do breakfast by probably 7:30 or 8. And then I'd try to do maybe an early lunch at like 11, probably 11:15. You could do a really good pre-workout snack, like 2 carbs, some protein, a little bit of fat. So like Greek yogurt, fruit and granola, or half a bagel with cream cheese and a cheese stick. Like it could be something more snack related. Obviously for lunch, I don't expect them to eat like a huge plate of pasta with chicken or something, but it could be like a turkey cheese sandwich, you know, keep it simple, but yeah. Any other questions about that you guys have, feel free to also post in the Facebook group, and I'll put a post there of like, hey, anyone need help with regionals or postseason, and we can also kind of strategize in that way. So with that, I know we've gone long, but I hope this was helpful, and I hope you guys feel more confident, and hopefully we've cleared up some of the confusion about sugar and sports drinks and all the things. And yeah, with that, I'll see you in the group. We'll have a gymnast Q&A April 21st, Sunday, where I'll be on Zoom with just your gymnast, and we'll be chatting about fueling and postseason and upgrade season, and just it's a fun thing that we do just to kind of help them get to meet each other, get to interact. And then yeah, lots of other exciting things come down the pipe. So with that, it's dinner time. So I'm gonna go finish making dinner, and I'll see you guys in the group. Bye for now.